Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Jake Smithwick. I'm a professor at the University of North Carolina, and I'm really pleased today to present with my colleagues research results elevating women's careers in facility management. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Kristen Hartado. Is an assistant research professor in the School of Sustainable Engineering and the Built Environment at Arizona State University. Her research interests include organizational transformation, project planning, and risk management, construction education and training, construction industry analytics, project and facility management. She has managed over 200 projects worth $1 billion in the US government, state agencies, universities, and utilities. She's also taught classes on construction delivery, RFP development, and numerous other courses. Kristen, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. We're also joined by Dr. Stephen Call, whose research focuses on facilities workforce planning and education. Steve has published several articles on workforce attrition and succession planning in the healthcare built environment. He is a member of the editorial committee for the Journal of Facility Management, Education, and Research, and previously served in local leadership positions with the International Facilities Management Association and Coronet Global. Steve brings more than a decade of professional experience leading national and multinational real estate, construction, and facilities programs across healthcare, defense, technology, and manufacturing industries. So, Steve, thank you so much for being here. Kristen, thank you for being here. And with that said, we'll dive into today's presentation. So, what this presentation is really focusing on is that the last several years, our research team, collectively known as the Simplar Group or the Simplar Foundation, is that we've been very fortunate to do a number of research studies with IFMA focusing on workforce, women in facilities management. And today what we're going to do is really focus on some of the key results that has been presented. And at the end of the presentation, I'll have some links where you can download and access the reports through IFMA's bookstore. So we'll go through the state of the workforce. We'll talk about the value of credentials and education in FM, salary and compensation trends, mentorship and personalities, and then finally some final thoughts to wrap all this up here. So a little bit about our group, about Simplar. We are researchers and educators. As you saw, that we're all professors at different universities. There's several others that we all work together. And really the focus here is on facilities professionals as owners or buyers of different services is becoming a client of choice. And there's a whole lot of research and effort that goes into that, but that's really what our main area is. And IFMA has been one of our premier partners, and we are so grateful to have an opportunity to work with you all as members and professionals, and we're grateful to have that opportunity. So kind of a brief history lesson here that we've had a number of practical reports that have been published. 2017 was really the first one that we published with IFMA. 2018, 2020, things have since exploded to a number of different areas. And last year, this is just a sample of the different reports that were published in 2024. One of the major initiatives, especially from the benchmarking and the overall standpoint, is having a global perspective about the various issues that affect many of you that are on today's event. So we're really thankful, and we're looking forward to present some of the key results here. So the first thing I'm going to go through is ask Steve to talk about us. What does the FM look like? What are the job profiles, and what are some of their characteristics with that? So Steve, why don't you jump in here and walk us through what a typical FM looks like? And Steve, you may be on mute, so if you could unmute yourself, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that, Jake. So the typical facility manager is actually highly employable, right? So most facility managers out there are currently employed. This is coming from surveys of thousands of facility managers globally. So what we're showing is 96% of those who are in the profession are employed. And so it's a good profession to be in. The other thing that's interesting is that it's predominantly made up of male employees. About 22% of the facility managers in the profession are female. This is interesting because it really hasn't changed over the past decade from previous research about 10 years ago. That 80-20 blend of male to female has stayed true and has not shifted much over time. FM professionals are generally well educated. I think there's sometimes a perception out there that facility managers don't have as much education as other professions, but that simply doesn't hold true when we look at the data. So 70% of folks have bachelor's degrees or have degrees, master's degrees, and that's substantially increased over the past decade or so. So that's been a good trend. As far as in-house versus contracted status for facility managers, most are employed in-house. So over 80% of facility managers out there are working directly for their organization versus just under 20% who are contracted employees. This is a graph showing the most common majors for those who hold bachelor's degrees. Interior design, liberal arts, facility management, engineering, and business management are the most common degrees. What's really interesting, though, is facility management as a degree is the only degree that's actually experiencing growth, meaning over time, more and more folks are focusing on facility management as an actual bachelor's degree focus, even though business management is still the focus. And what we're also finding is a lot of facility managers are actually pursuing that bachelor's degree after they get into the profession. So the traditional model of getting into the profession is being in as far as a trade or some type of entry-level administrative role, and shifting into a management role in facilities. That degree is pursued many times after full-time employment within the industry. This is showing the respondents. Where is this data coming from? Those thousands of respondents I mentioned that were surveyed. More than 70% are coming from North America. That's not necessarily surprising, considering that's where most of the facility managers out there are working, with a certain percentage globally as well, everywhere from Asia, the Middle East, to Europe, Africa, as well as South and Latin America. This is a graph showing the different levels within facility management. So level 1 obviously would be an entry-level type role, all the way to a level 5, which is a very high-level senior-level role. So what's great about the information that we gather is we had a pretty nice blend between the different levels, and we were able to kind of separate that data to understand what are the unique issues occurring entry-level, mid-level, and even senior-level careers. So this is showing the different tenures and experience that can be anticipated at those different levels. So level 1, an entry-level facility manager role, what's really interesting is they still typically have almost 10 years of management experience, even at a level 1. So what that's saying is that somebody's typically in the industry for a while before they're promoted or advanced to a manager position. And then that tenure, understandably, over time grows as those job levels increase. It is also interesting to point out that those born before 1978 or the younger respondents had a shorter average tenure than those who were born after 1978. So a couple of assumptions could be made there, but what we're finding is, because of the nature of facility management, many times to progress in careers, many times it's necessary to actually change employers to be able to find those career growth opportunities. So I think that's what happens early on in a career, is there's some movement to achieve that advancement, and then once there's a level 3, 4, or 5, most folks seem to stay around and stop moving as much. Management responsibilities. So what type of operating budget could I expect to manage, and capital budget could I expect to manage, and number of people. This is a graph showing what that looks like for those different job levels. So at entry level, many times you're more of an expert. Maybe you're not necessarily managing directly people, but as you move into those mid and senior level roles, a senior level role, you're up to a total of about 15 people on average that you're managing, with about 1 million square feet, give or take, with around a $5 million operating budget. So that's kind of what can be expected. And we're not going to necessarily maybe go into the details of this today, but we do have a full report showing, if I'm at a level 4 and I'm managing this kind of budget, this is the type of income I could be expecting. So that's helpful.
Stephen, I think one of the interesting things too that we've seen is that, as a result of COVID, as many facility professionals saw, that really brought FM to the forefront of, like, these folks here are a key part of managing our facilities, and we certainly highlighted it. And again, these are averages, right, or medians, and folks can have significantly more responsibility than perhaps what's shown in these slides as well.
Certainly. So yeah, again, what it highlights is the fact that a facility manager is clearly managing a lot of people, a lot of budget responsibility. So it's a really important role within an organization. This is showing some the average age of respondents, specifically to women in facility management. The average woman in facility management is about 45 years old, which is interesting because when it's compared to men, women are showing it is showing that women are on average generally younger than their male counterparts, which is again another reason why we recommend as researchers that employers that are struggling with this attrition issue, that women actually be considered a strategic advantage in addressing some of that aging workforce issue, just because of the average age compared to men. Here's a gender mix by region showing, as I mentioned earlier, the average is 81% men, 19% women on average, but you can see that varies a little bit by region. Start with the highest proportion of women in North America and the lowest proportion towards the Middle East. Common mix by industry. So we were trying to understand, are there certain industries out there where we're seeing more women employed in FM versus other industries? And what we found is there's not a significant difference, but there is we are noting some trends, which is a little bit interesting in that government, for example, is actually showing the lowest portion of women as a percent of the FM workforce, even though many times it's the government that are pursuing some of those DEI type initiatives more than others. So that's kind of an interesting finding. And this is a gender mix by function. So here are the common. So as we all know, facility managers wear many hats, but the primary function that a facility manager focuses on, most are dealing with facility operations, even though others might have a stronger focus on real estate or construction or engineering or interior design and space planning. And so we tried to see what that mix looked like as well. And it was a pretty close mix between what men and women were focusing on, and it still is facility operations within the industry.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings, so one of the overall things we were seeing, Steve, is I want to bring Kristen into the conversation here about, education and, how we got to where we are today. And Kristen, I know you've had quite the star-studded career here in terms of experiences and different things that you looked at. I'm wondering if you could kind of frame our next part of our discussion in terms of education. What has your educational journey look like? How did you get involved with facilities management? If you could talk to about what that'd be fantastic.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Happy to share my experiences and tell kind of my story. So I consider myself kind of a result of the built environment, the profession there. And so how I got involved, kind of early on at a very young age, I enjoyed math and science. And so I was kind of naturally pushed towards kind of the engineering sort of built environment side of things. And I was fortunate to have some great teachers along the way and folks that kind of shepherded me into this. And then early on, actually in college, I immediately joined mentoring programs. One of the bigger ones was the Society of Women in Engineers, SWE. And I was paired with an industry mentor who happened to be female, and got to job shadow her and see what that was like. Eventually, I ended up moving more in a managerial sort of construction and facilities operations type of a degree, and really was a magnet for finding folks who had my dream job and actively sought them. We'll talk later, but I really found that networking through professional associations such as IFMA really pivoted my career. And so being able to do that really helped me see what potential future career opportunities I had, in addition to being able to see myself as that person. I think that's a key component on the mentoring side is your mentor. You need to kind of be able to visualize that you eventually become them in some way. And so anyways, I did change employers quite a bit, not because I was a floater, but because my personality is more of a 31 flavors kind of a personality, which fits really well with facilities management, right? It's the perfect storm, I like to say, of like people and infrastructure. And so I worked for some contractors. I worked in semiconductor manufacturing. And again, on the networking side, really found those positions and those jobs through my network, through people I had met, whether they were like quote unquote formal mentors or not. And then this last decade or so of my career switched more to academia and the side of research and creating training programs around facilities management, which has also afforded me the opportunity to still be a student of my profession and to help those, who know more than me and with an expansive industry background to create training and different things with IFMA and other areas. So yeah, I've really kind of moved around, but I really do see mentorship and networking as being the critical aspects of what really brought me to success and a lot of job satisfaction. I love what I do. Every day is very different. A couple times a month, I'll be talking with facility managers from around the world, hearing about their challenges and opportunities and mentoring them through their career paths and educational and training journeys. So sorry, that was kind of a long story.
No, that's a great answer, Krista. And one of the major research studies that you've kind of led the effort on is the value of education and credentials. Your PhD was in that area as well. So you've got significant experience in the space here. And so what we next wanted to do is if you could walk us through one of these studies and the major takeaways you've seen with that, I think would be super interesting. So if you want to jump to that, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. So in this study, it was exciting because this was the second study we did years later to look at the changes or differences, if there were any, in sort of the credentialing area of things that IFMA has, as we know, 3 different credentials. And so some of this also shows comparisons as to how things have changed since 2016. So in this first research, what was really exciting to see is the variety of responses we got, not only geographically, but also in terms of company size. So across the about 1,200 responses we got, those were from 829 different companies. So it wasn't as if we were talking to the most prominent employers or only the big companies. There was quite a spread there. Internationally too. Jake, if you want to go to the next one. And what we really looked at, and again, some of this is based on our own understanding and experience, is that when we talk about FM training, I can't steal this, although I would love to. I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago, the FMJ, Facilities Management Journal, the magazine that IFMA has, they had a great headline for one of their articles. And the whole focus was kind of around looking to the future facilities management. And it said, FM, the accidental profession. And I thought that was really apropos because of all the folks I've seen, and it is changing, but majority, there's not a straight line, a straight path to facilities management in the past. Now there are, and things are changing. So we kind of find our way to facilities management through a variety of different ways. And some of it, as Steve pointed out, is also just trying to advance and realizing we may have to change to companies or job titles for that. And so as we're kind of navigating our non-straight line journeys, we can get training and advancement from a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's internal to the company and sometimes it's outside of the company. So in this study, we were trying to look at both because we know companies have training programs, even if it's compliance, some of it's fantastic and others is there's some areas of opportunity. And then of course, going to organizations like IFMA to get training. So we looked at both for these. And so what we found when we asked the survey respondents to look inside, there's about 33% of companies that don't have training. They just don't really have much in the way to kind of help their folks. And so with that, those that do, there's some lacking there in terms of satisfaction. And it does take a village, so to speak, to train and upskill folks who are currently working at the company or new to the company. So it's a lot of effort. There needs to be a return on investment to make those kinds of programs internally. So when we look at it externally, groups like IFMA, have fantastic credential and training opportunities. And so externally, only 25% didn't have external training, which I'd like to see that a lot lower, but it's pretty good. And larger satisfaction, especially compared to internal. And again, it's just a lot to have, your own learning and development team creating this training, and then you're continually updating and advancing and looking at new topics and technology. And that's not a lot of companies can make that kind of investment. So when we look at our credentials seen and held in high regard across the industry, you tend to look at job postings and see, well, I may have, like, I coach and mentor a lot of folks that, they have maybe experience and they look at their resume, but they don't have maybe the training or the formal education for that. And so they're looking to apply to different jobs and kind of see if their resume fits the bill. And so what are the job posts asking for? What are the companies asking for? And so we've seen a huge increase in companies requiring IFMA credentials, and we can kind of see why, right? If companies can't provide internal training and they can't upskill their own folks, they need groups like IFMA to create the training, to have these credentials that are held in high regard. So most of the job postings you will see generally have some sort of IFMA credential type of training requirement.
So, Krista, I wonder if I could ask you, we've all worked with, as educators and as researchers, that we work with a number of folks that are up and coming. They're younger in their careers, perhaps, both men and women. If you were to talk to the Kristen of a few years ago that's going through college and learning, what sorts of advice would you have for somebody when it comes to some of these credentials, and how that can enhance their career? Can you comment on that for a moment?
Sure. I feel like I'm always a student of the profession. You should never stop learning. The moment you stop learning, you stop growing. And most want growth in their career. So it's kind of got to be that extra thing that you always work at and you always do. And you don't forget, you don't push off until later. You don't wait until you need to apply to a job and see what the job is requiring. Now, that's not to say that transitioning to facilities, you're not going to have to do that. You will, of course. But I think keeping the momentum of never stop learning, keeping the momentum of being a student of your profession. And I have to say, don't quote me on that because that's not my quote. Someone else, the director from Discount Tire Facilities, he says that all the time. I'm just stealing quotes for everyone today. So yeah, continue to work at it, to get at it. It's challenging. It's hard to have one other thing on top of work, on top of family, on top of life. But it'll be exponential in terms of your growth. Like, it'll just skyrocket you. And then don't discount any of the networking that comes with that. So for example, some of these workshops that IFMA has and the conferences and the symposiums, you're finding mentors, you're finding your network as you attend and go to those things. So it isn't just a box checking exercise. Your professional development should actually be developing you and not treat it as like, oh, compliance, I've done it. And now I'm done. And now I can do like my real job.
That's a great question? Yeah, absolutely, Kristen. Thank you. I'm wondering if, Steve, if you could comment for it too. I know you've worked in a number of, international type of jobs and other more facilities focused experiences. From a education standpoint, somebody that is up and coming and is trying to advance their careers, can you offer some of your perspectives as well? I think would be beneficial.
Yeah, what's becoming the facility management profession is maturing, and a lot of it's driven by the reality of organizations that are needing that higher level of strategic type influence within the facility management world, because it is such a huge responsibility, right? Managing millions of dollars worth of assets, hundreds of people, and really critical type functions. So most organizations are now actually requiring minimum education requirements. So it's not uncommon to require a bachelor's degree, for example, to be a facility manager in many organizations. So it's not just a good thing; it's actually expected to even have sometimes even an entry level role in facility management. So that's why it is so critical. In the past, you might be able to get in the industry and then get your degrees, but it's becoming a really important aspect Now, it doesn't have to be in facility management. It can probably be a major in various areas, but it's such a strength to be able to come into a position where you've had a degree in the built environment, whether that's facility management, construction management, maybe even engineering. And so it's really becoming more of a requirement as far as the minimum education. And then even master's degrees, right? At those senior level roles, it's not uncommon now to even see a requirement for masters, especially in industries like healthcare, for example. To be a director or above many times is a minimum of a master's degree even now. So it's becoming more and more important.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Hey,
So,
Jake,
Kristen,
I'm reading the comments. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Do we want to respond to some of these now? Because some of them are pertinent. I mean, networking and mentoring is happening right now in the chat. Woohoo! I love it. I was going to say it's helpful too to older self would tell future, or future self would tell older self, use even things like this to connect with other people, to foster those relationships and to reach out. Early on in our careers, as Steve's data was showing, we're not really managing that many people. It's only when you get to like levels 2, 3, and 4 where you kind of have a staff. So leadership opportunities may be few and far between. I saw a comment about that, but take groups like IFMA, join a council or something to where you can actually lead people, even though in your day-to-day 7-to-7 job, you're not. Take advantage of those opportunities. They'll go on your resume, but they'll do more than that. They'll give you those kinds of leadership skills that some of you were talking about, trying to look for as you go advance to the next level. And I think sometimes, I know just me personally, I forget about those other things that I do and how they shaped me, and really need to acknowledge those, and that gives you the confidence to go to the leadership, to the next levels, and to advance your career. Sorry, Jake. I was reading the comments like, yes, this is awesome. People are networking.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Kristen, why don't you talk to us about how folks typically pay for their training? What the data show us from that standpoint?
Well, good news, it's increasing, but I would like it to be 100%. I think every company should just invest in their employees. And I'm talking to companies regularly about, just investing, even if it's a small time, just going to an IFMA conference. It doesn't have to be sponsoring an FMP. I always get the comment of, well, I don't want to pay for my people, and then they leave. Why would I invest in them and their training? They're just going to leave because they're going to look great on their resume and then go. And I say, well, what happens if you don't invest in them and then they stay and they never grow? Then you have an employee with zero growth. That's not really who you want either. So yeah, good news, it is increasing. I've also met folks that, they just want to pay for it themselves and they want to have that sense of ownership. So, but yes, it's growing, which is good news.
Yeah, it's like that comment from, it's actually Hillary just posted on the LinkedIn page that their biggest business card and elevator pitch has been their master's degree. So certainly paying for that and would highlight that is a fantastic opportunity as well here, right? So that's awesome. So you saw a 70% increase, right? Is what you're kind of saying?
Yes.
Awesome.
But it needs to be higher, but it's good.
Yes,
Increase is better than decrease.
That's right.
So then kind of looking at, how can we increase that? What are companies looking at in terms of what are the value they want to see to be able to afford it? Now, some of it's just budget cuts, right? Some of it's just companies will just not be able to afford it in certain sectors. But, they're really wanting to make sure that whoever they invest, is having an impact and, on their understanding, on adding value and their performance. And so also talking about when you do take training or you are in a degree program or you're furthering yourself, how you're actually using it, because you're using it, right? But everyone needs to hear of that and understand that, they got what they paid for if they invested in you, and you want to know you got what you paid for in terms of your training.
And that's great too. We had somebody else that just posted, Adriana, that said that there's not been really a requirement per se of having an advanced degree. But again, the value of that, as you showed here, is that people get value when they get education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So when things are on the chopping block and budgets are being cut, what are companies looking for? And they're like, well, do we really need to pay for this? Do we have to pay for that training? It's about finding relevance. So, for IFMA's credentials, looking at, how that could actually advance you and teach you the skills that may be required for the next level or the promotion. Again, IFMA's held in high regard in terms of the subject matter, very affordable, considering what it all is. So, just consider that when you are making the ask, show how it relates to your current job function and, what they're going to get at the end of the day. Looking at, again, just the benefits here and some of this, I think IFMA has some great handouts on and marketing material to also share if anyone here is on the webinar and, really looking to convince your company to invest in you because you may not want to make that financial investment, or, maybe you do want to see your company demonstrate their commitment to you. So the good news is there's lots of performance benefits that were measured. So when we asked companies to compare people they had who were IFMA credentialed and those that weren't, across the board, IFMA credentialed employees were much higher performing in terms of just their overall performance based on those ratings. Those typical performance reviews, customer satisfaction, 62% higher in that, and just overall productivity. There's something that comes with having confidence and knowing that you're doing and operating kind of your daily routine in a best-in-class way, or even if it's not best-in-class, that it's the best your company can do. And the only way to really do that is to look outside. In some ways, historically, people may have been drawn to stay with a company for a very long time. So you spend 20, 30 years at a company, 30 years of one way. Training and credentialing and professional development allows you to look at the body of knowledge and how not just your company does it, how industry does it, and kind of sort of benchmark yourself against that. So that helps with increasing these factors. Good news when it comes to promotion. I mean, these are right up your alley in terms of working in your favor. When you did take that FMP test, when you did get that certificate, when you did advance with an online degree or whatever that may be, those all work in your favor in terms of influencing your job promotion.
Yeah, and that's great too. One of the other comments we had from Kathy Broderick was that she was out of the workforce for a number of years, and she pursued her MBA again as a way to perhaps get back into the workforce and help to elevate her position. In addition to having a CFM and other things with that too, it's certainly been a beneficial piece of that well here. And you saw about other benefits too related to salary compensation.
Yes. So we did see IFMA credentials do merit higher compensation. And again, it kind of goes back to on those job ads. They're required. And when you have them, then you get to that next ticket. Companies are looking at that. A lot of human resources personnel spend a good amount of time trying to see on different avenues how to, really get more competitive candidates. And so it makes those levels really clear in terms of advancement, which is nice. We want to have, a formal career path in facilities. Like we do want to have that. And so training kind of helps us achieve that. And yeah, just since 2017, the influence and merit of IFMA credentials has just grown tremendously. Also just participation in it, how many people have gotten their FMPs has just grown to a high level. And so it's just really great to see this. Again, I'm like I want all companies to pan out everyone and all this stuff. But seeing the growth since 2017 has really been great and really encouraging that you are doing the right thing when you choose to invest in yourself, and your company is doing the right thing when they choose to invest in you.
Absolutely. And so far what we've kind of talked about here is what does the typical FM look like? Clearly the message from Kristen and certainly all of us is the value of education. But certainly another part of the job equation is what does pay and compensation look like? And so Steve, let's hop over to you for a few minutes and talk us through about what does typical compensation look like for an FM, benefits offered, and other related information.
Sure. These slides will be pretty much showing averages, and we all know that there's a pretty wide spectrum based on what your what your job level is, maybe what function you focus on. So again, you can reference the IFMA Global Compensation Report to get specifics, but they're just kind of generally speaking, the average base salary for an FM professional is just under $100,000 a year. The good news is we've seen almost a 10% increase over the last decade or so. So the salaries are growing. Most FM professionals are eligible for bonuses. About 63% of facility managers do get a bonus. but again, varies quite a bit by job level. So an entry level role most typically doesn't have one, and most senior levels do. Most FM professionals, about 60%, receive a base pay increase. And this was kind of looking at, several years ago, but that was in 2020. So we're seeing that most are getting, annual increases. They have bonus potential, and there's mixed sentiment regarding future pay increases, as 68% of respondents believe they will receive a pay increase in 2021. So we're also showing is that there is optimism that salaries will continue to grow, that folks will be rewarded for their hard work and the growth that's happening within the industry.
And that's a good comment too, Steve, is that this data is a little bit old, but we are actively updating the salary and compensation report that'll be happening over the next couple of months. So we're looking forward to presenting the latest data about these trends as well. And frankly, Steve, we probably expect the salaries to have continued to increase, but we'll know for sure here in a few months. So.
Yeah, we're excited to see what those new numbers come in. So these numbers are about a few years old, but the new report will shed some additional light on it. This is also interesting to note. A lot of times we talk about job levels as the kind of the primary differentiator between salaries, but also what you're focused on within your job function. So if you're like most facility managers, I mentioned earlier, are focused on facility operations, they're pretty much right at that, that average around $98,000 per year. But if you have more of a focus on construction and project management, you see a little bump. And if you focus more on real estate, transaction management, you see an even bigger bump. So that's interesting to note as folks are trying to figure out maybe different areas within FM that they're interested in. It's not always about operations. There's other areas within facilities that folks can focus on. And frankly, there's some variety in how the market responds to that as far as pay. And as is noted, if you're interested in looking at the detail there, that can be provided in the full report that's available through the IFMA bookstore. By region, clearly there's significant differences. You got North America, where the average salary is over $100,000 a year, and then steadily kind of drops even to the point in Africa when we're only looking at about $47,000 a year. So those are quite a bit of difference between those base salaries by where you live in the world. Again, this is kind of highlighting bonus eligibility. So about 63% of folks are bonus eligible, which is good to know, right? Some of this is saying, well, if maybe I want to get in the industry, or I'm trying to understand if I'm being paid fairly, or I have a couple different job offers. This just kind of provides a baseline to say, you could probably assume that you should, have some type of bonus potential in facility management.
Steve, I don't know if we could answer this, but one of the comments we had for Vashani was, why do only 63% of firms offer those bonus potentials? And it's hard to speculate, I would say, right? But it's probably tied to the type of organization they work for. If it's public versus private, any insights as to why there's not, I guess, more folks offering those bonuses?
Well, and again, the report can provide more detail, and off the top of my head, I don't have the number, but it's more based, in my opinion, on job levels. So, if you're at a level 1 or even a level 2, highly likely that you're not going to have a bonus structure within your salary. But as you move up in those higher level roles, that's when you're going to see a higher level of bonus. And then you're right on top of that, it depends on what industry you're in. So government positions, for example, may not have a bonus structure within their compensation, but if you're working for a bank or a financial institution, that's common. So it really depends on the job level, and then on the industry you're in is commonly the differentiator. And then just some quick facts that are of interest. FM professionals that receive retirement benefits is very considered by global region. So again, retirement benefits in North America, for example, look very different than in Europe, just based on the structure of what government provides and what industry is expected to provide within those benefits. But in North America, 95% of respondents have retirement benefits through their company. Here's an example of. Sorry, can you go back? Can you go? Oh, okay. Go ahead. Go forward, and then we'll go back, Jake. So this is showing what of those folks who have benefits. This is most commonly the types of benefits that they receive. So almost everyone is having some sort of health and dental life vision prescription starts dropping. So again, when you're looking at maybe comparable offers or looking to get back in the industry, these are some of the things that you can safely assume that should be part of your compensation package. And then going back, most common type of employers providing retirements for FM is a defined contribution. So it's very uncommon to have, for example, like a pension anymore, at least in North America. And typically you'll see like a 401k type of defined contribution. And in the report, it actually shows what percent of employee matching you can expect. So there's some detail as well. On average, an FM professional receives about a month of vacation per year. There is becoming more of a trend for what we call unlimited or unaccrued vacation, especially in like the tech industry. But that's excluding that number is excluding that. But I'm interested as we look at the new salary report, if that's starting to tick upwards as far as this unaccrued vacation as a trend. And then commute time is interesting. Kind of this again was the original data for this was towards the tail end of COVID. So it was about 8 hours per day per week that was common for weekly commutes. That was a decrease compared to prior to COVID. So that about 10 hours a week is probably the standard expected commute time for most facility managers.
Awesome. So I think kind of the last part of this discussion here, Steve, that we wanted to go through is that we've looked at what FMs look like from a demographic standpoint. Kristen gives some great insights about the role of education, and we've talked about pay and compensation as well here. One part that I want to talk about is the role of mentorship and really personalities or human dimensions as we look at facility professionals. So as part of the data we collected a couple of years ago, one of the questions we asked was, you as a facilities professional, are you interested in succession planning or mentorship? And Steve, we had like 4,000 people, I think, responded to the survey, and we had like 90% of everybody that said, yes, we definitely want more information about that. And so in response to that data, we developed, and we're currently developing some new tools to help us better understand that. And I'll kind of close this out where the future is going from a research standpoint as to how we can answer really these questions here, right? Do we sometimes, as FMs or folks that are hiring FMs or technicians, finding somebody that's, quote, the right fit for our organization? What makes a team work well together? And frankly, we've all seen this is how do you do more with less? And of course, budget cuts are a huge part of what that is here. In today's current labor market, both here in North America and also throughout the world, there is a major talent shortage. And it's challenged today. And as you look at all the data, when you go forward to the next 20 years, frankly, folks, it's only getting more challenging as we look to the future. And the reason why here is that there's a limited pool of expertise, people that have the skills, have the insights, and as older folks that have all those years and years of experience start to retire, that changes the fundamental demographics of how we get things done in the built environment. One of the major takeaways is that as a facilities leader, clients, buyers, contractors, suppliers, everybody, we're all in competition for the same limited pool of skilled personnel, right? So technology is important, process is important, but at the end of the day here, it's all about the people who are doing the work. And so this particular research studies, we looked at, well, what does an FM look like? How do they think? What does make somebody a good fit for facilities management? And that's really what we looked at here is how do we hire people? What are the qualifications, the availability? And really, these are the typical things that most organizations look at when they make some of these hiring decisions, but that really doesn't answer the question of what makes someone a good fit for our organization. There's other data out there. 30% of firms have lowered their hiring standards because they can't find folks. 42% of firms have actually increased spending on training. So to Kristen's point, that's a good thing. We're not 100%, but that's in the right direction here. But going forward, our opinion as a research consortium is that we have to have a better approach that looks at the people and the technology and how those two folks work together, right? So what are we actually doing about that? Well, we're focused on the people we already have and may one day have inside of our organizations. And how are we doing this is by understanding the human dimension of facility professionals. So when you think about the traits of an FM, and part of what the study looked at, we're not psychologists, none of us are, but we've looked into a lot of the data in the space here. And when we think about the traits of an FM, there's really three main groups or categories this falls into. There's the personality side of it, which the tool we used was called Hexago. There's emotional intelligence, and the last one is behavior. And there's a tool called DISC that goes through and look at that. So briefly here, I wanted to highlight some of the key trends that we're seeing from an FM. Again, these are all facilities professionals and what they look like from a personality standpoint. So from personalities, we see that most FMs show higher levels of humbleness, more sincerity, and display modesty compared to other types of job functions. And the reason why here is that FMs, as we all know, are problem solvers and are trustworthy. So if you are looking or exploring this career, or folks that are maybe looking for a career change, people that generally fall into these categories are likely to have a higher level of success and enjoy the position that FM brings to us, right? Agreeableness, forgiveness, flexibility, greater patience, right? I mean, how many of us at FM have to deal with things that require a tremendous amount of patience? Steve, we won't go into details here about your experience, but I'm sure that patience is a key part of what that looks like here. And the reason why is that when I look at the data, it really focuses on collaboration and being adaptable in a variety of different experiences. Part of this data as well, we looked at the emotional intelligence side of things, and we found that specifically from a self-management measure, FMs tended to score lower compared to our broader benchmarks as to when we look at what these personalities look at. And we think the reason why is for this is that as an FM, as we're all aware, we're pulled in all sorts of different directions all at the same time. And so it takes a lot of discipline to say, I can't do this right now because I have to deal with 10 other fires over here. And so it becomes a very difficult task here that we're constantly pulled in lots of different directions when we think about what this really entails as we look at this here. Some of the other data too, and again, I'll have a link to the full report. We looked at different levels of experience. Again, folks that had many years of experience in FM. For those that were just starting in FM, tended to be more modest compared to those that have 30 years experience. Is that they have an even higher levels of modesty, which is interesting, right? The more experience people have here, they tended to show higher levels of modesty, humility, and honesty, more extroversion, and again, higher social esteem, just because they had years and years to build up these experiences. So as we looked at this data, and really this entire series of reports that we've talked about here today is really pointing to the value of mentorship. And Steve, I want to bring you in just for a moment here to talk about one of the major takeaways we saw from the salary survey was the role in mentorship. Can you talk about this for a minute?
Sure. So, we looked at the various factors that were impacting why folks were potentially leaving their organizations. And so what we found is that there were some common factors kind of going down the list is, and they didn't have a flexible work schedule, or they felt burned out, or they had poor job security, or the employer wasn't supportive of family responsibilities, or they were being discriminated against, or they were dissatisfied with pay, right? Those are a number of factors that were barriers to somebody staying with their organization, which again, we know is a problem right now. We want to keep as many of our talent as we can and not have them leave the industry. So when we looked into, was there anything that helped eliminate some of these factors that were creating problems? And we realized that if someone said that they had a mentor, they were much less likely to struggle with these factors or have these factors that were impacting their tenure. Now, this was common for both men and women, but it also showed that women actually received even some additional benefits to having a mentor within their roles. So you can kind of just look through this list and show, for example, a big one is on average, if you didn't have a mentor, or if you felt burned out, Only 58% of those that had a mentor said they felt burned out when you're looking at women. If they had no mentor, 70% of those folks said they felt burned out. Did they experience sexual harassment? Only 6% of those who said they had a mentor said they experienced sexual harassment, and almost twice as many said that they did if they didn't have a mentor. So you can see that for some reason, having that mentor relationship is really a positive thing for both men and women, but especially for women. So there seems to be something about that that plays a huge role in retaining employees and creating an environment or an atmosphere where people are happier. They're not dealing with is such a high level some of these factors that are impacting their desire and ability to stay employed within facility management.
So I think kind of to recap that, Steve, is that basically what we saw here is that looking at every single measure of job satisfaction, whether female or male, having a mentor dramatically improves the outcomes of that experience in a work environment, right?
You're right. And so, it's very rare for researchers to say, oh, we found the silver bullet, right? We're always talking about attrition and retention and how do we have enough people to handle the workload. And in many ways, having this idea of mentorship really seems to play is in some ways a silver bullet. And we're doing more research about why that's the case. We don't have all the answers as far as, well, is that internal and external, or is the specific gender match important, or et cetera, et cetera. But we're looking into that, and we're really excited to start digging into that research and understanding this even more.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings me to the next point here, is that going back to the personality standpoint, in our data set of several hundred FMs, we looked at those that were serving as mentors and what did their personalities look like. In terms of organizational skills, we saw higher levels, more forgiving, more boldness here. And we think that these kind of explain why, as a mentor and working with folks that are trying to enhance their careers, is why we see those as those outcomes. There's a number of questions in the chat box here about, for women in FM, what does the role of a mentor look like? I will tell you, we are actively working on this right now. There is an active research project with IFMA that is going to be rolling out that looks at how do we structure mentoring programs, how do we pair mentors together with mentees, and so that project is actively ongoing here. We're going to be looking for pilot studies, groups that want to participate in our studies. So please, we'll have some information about that, but that is currently ongoing right now, and there's a lot of great questions about this. When we think about the mentorship part of it, Kristen, you and I have known each other for a long time. I know you've shared with me that the role of mentorship has certainly been a big part of your career. And I'm wondering if you could just highlight for us some of the key things that you've seen that a mentor has enhanced your career personally. Any thoughts about that?
Sure. Yeah. As I was kind of mentioning in my background, at the beginning of this presentation, I've had a lot of mentors. Some of them were formal and through associations, professional groups, and plenty of them were informal. And not all of them have stayed in my life, just because of job changes and movement and different things. Most of them have. But I don't know where I would be without mentors, to be honest with you. If I had just relied on like coworkers, there's just big differences among coworkers that may exist, and questions that you may feel uncomfortable asking someone who's working at the same company you're working at. So I even challenge, the idea that you should have a mentor. I think you should have multiple mentors, and potentially one within the company. I don't know that you would call them a mentor. External to where you're working is helpful. I think you should have a mentor that has your dream job, in addition to your kind of next level job. But like I said, I don't know where I would be without a mentor. And I've had male and female mentors, currently still do. And, I think that just that support and that network is needed, and someone you can go to ask questions to, and you can see that there is a future, that you do have a career path, that there could, what the potential next steps of your career could be. I wouldn't be where I was without mentors.
Awesome. So to kind of wrap all this together for those mentoring best practices, as I mentioned, the research, the new project we're doing that this year in 2025 is that we're taking the update to the salary and compensation study. We're looking at the human dimensions, personality profiles, and we're also looking at some additional new studies about women in FM. And these are collectively going to form the basis of this new research study about how do we actually do mentoring in facilities management specifically. And so that will be coming out here. And we're extremely excited to deliver that. And it's going to be a fantastic opportunity to do that, right? So if you want access to the research studies, I've pull out your phones and take a screenshot. I think on the screen we'll drop in the links to each one of these studies here. The Global Salary Compensation Report, that's our first one on the left-hand side, followed by the Credential Study, that's the educational one. There's actually, I think there's 3 or 4, Kristen, that we've done over the years with IFMA, so you can go on the bookstore and look for all of those. The Human Dimensions Profiles Report, that one just came out about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. So that one is our latest one. Retention and advancement of women in FM is another study. And then we had a follow-on study with that as well. So those will be popping up on the screen here momentarily. So if you want to access any one of those are available on the website. So be sure to check about that, and that would be fantastic. So final thoughts here. Investing in credentials pays off. There's clear data. It's not up for debate. Clearly, the data shows not just barely pays off, but it really substantially pays off to get educated. Whether it's credentials or other degrees, it does make a difference. Knowledge transfer and leadership development. Frankly, folks, with all the people that are retiring, and we have a lot more new people coming in, it's always been important, but I think it's probably of paramount importance today. Given our current situation here. And finally, of course, mentorship does enhance career growth, personal satisfaction, job performance. Again, it's not really up for debate. The data clearly shows that, and those are certainly things that we want to highlight through that. I think we're going to send out the slides from today's discussion, but if you have another question, certainly reach out to me or Kristen or Steve for that matter. In fact, I'll go to the first slide here. Here's our email addresses. So you're more than welcome to email any one of us, and we're more than happy to take any question you have and do the best we can to answer that. And also, all registrants, you will receive a copy of the slides in your email as well, but certainly feel free to reach out to us here. So with that said, there's a couple of questions that we've gotten in the chat box here. So maybe I'll highlight a couple of those. If you have other questions, now would be a good time to do that. One of the questions that we received here from Vashani was, and maybe I'll turn this to you, Kristen, just based on your experiences, is how do self-driven professionals identify blind spots in their career development? And it kind of seems like that's a really good point as a mentor, is to help us see where we can improve on, right? Is that kind of been your experience as well?
Yeah, you got to take a cold, hard look at yourself, and it's easier to not be yourself to do that. So yeah, job application process is one of those like cold, hard truths where you just like, how do I look on paper? What does this actually look like? If I'm an HR person and I'm looking, and then again, just based on someone who has your dream job, how did they get there? How do your journeys differ, or are they similar? It's asking hard questions, which, as Jake's mentioned, it is a lot easier to have someone else kind of help you through that. LinkedIn's really cool because you can look at people's backgrounds and kind of see some of that history. You don't know how much of it is exactly true, but yeah, I think that's where, just talking to others, finding what they have, keeping yourself marketable and staying connected to groups like IFMA is a really like low cost, simple, easy way to do a lot of those things.
Absolutely. And Steve, maybe I wonder if I could get your perspective is serving as a mentor, taking on somebody that's a little bit younger than you on your wing and kind of helping them bring them through the ranks. What's kind of been your experience in that kind of role? Any thoughts or perspectives from you?
Yeah, I've never been in a position where, some organizations actually have formal assigned mentorship programs, which I think is a great thing. And that'll be hopefully part of the research to understand if there's any value in that versus informal. But regardless, I think those informal mentorship relationships are important. I've definitely have had people reach out to me just to kind of, ask some questions and see how I got to where I am today. And I think that's important, right? And so it really is incumbent upon the person that wants to be mentored to reach out and start developing those relationships. And so it's refreshing and it's easy. You know, if somebody's reaching out, I think most professionals are more than happy to share their experiences, as I have been over the years. I will say it has not been, and I've been in the industry almost 20 years at various, senior leadership roles. It's been pretty uncommon for someone to reach out to me. I've had it in the past, right? But so I think that's part of it is encouraging and supporting. That whole idea of mentoring and networking needs to happen more, I think. But because I think most professionals, as I can say, are more than happy to share their knowledge. So it's something that needs to improve and happen more often for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Well, with that said here, folks, on behalf of all three of us, we sincerely appreciate your time and effort today. There's been a number of research studies that we've put together, and we're just so grateful to you all as participants, as IFMA, to sponsor these studies. Kristen, thank you so much. Steve, thank you so much. With that said, you all take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.